to the people who you're really here to see. I'm Ariella Morkowitz. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I am the founding director of SVIVAH, and it is so nice to see so many new faces, so many familiar faces. I'm going to ask a personal favor, please. If I don't know you yet, hang out until the end to say hello and introduce yourself. Don't run off. I will stay. If you're comfortable saying hi, I'd love it. And if you're comfortable staying and I do know you, please don't run off and let me say hello, because that would be so nice too. 30 seconds about SVIVAH. SVIVAH is about creating a more nourishing communal faith experience for Jewish women, where we define both Jewish and women very broadly. If you want to be with us, we want you with us and welcome. We love that we are multi-generational and diverse in our backgrounds and our affiliations, and we come together in celebration and support of women, our strengths, our unique perspectives, our ways of contributing to the world, and of all nights, our stories. A reminder, most of us are actually new to each other, and we'd like to ask you to embrace this awesome diversity and newness and approach the conversation and each other with that honesty and openness, because that's what will make tonight special. I want to make sure to thank those who make HerTorah possible. First, always, Rabbi Emily Meyer, our director of HerTorah, for your incredible thoughtfulness and creativity in building these beautiful, beautiful rooms. You never cease to amaze me. These opportunities to learn with and from each other. You are a wonder. Thank you. And a big thank you to the Aviv Foundation for their faith in HerTorah to create a unique way of learning together in community. I want to make sure to stop talking and turn the evening over to our incredible educators, so I promise to talk quickly. We hope tonight is just one of the many times that we get to see your face, because we have more coming up, including after Pesach. Our next Her Help conversation is dedicated to tracing the path of a Jewish woman's sexual lifetime. It is going to be great, I promise. You'll find out more on our website, and I'll bombard you in your inbox, of course. Willa, our fabulous tech support, if you don't mind, can you share our SVIVAH rules? If you have a second, just to remind everybody of our SVIVAH expectations of how we gather, to respect everyone here. Let me see if I can help. To show up as your fabulous self with your hot mess, laundry piles, cats roaming across the screen, everything. Above all, what happens here stays here. And please make an effort to introduce yourself to someone new tonight. You can compliment someone's artwork behind them, ask them where they got their couch, or tell them that they remind you of your college roommate, anything like that. But just say hello, because I can promise you that each of you are fantastic humans and you should all know each other. Willa, thank you so much. Also, some small housekeeping. If you don't mind, make sure that your Zoom name is listed as you would if you had a name tag if we were in person. And a favor to ask of all of you. We have a beautifully diverse group here tonight, and in all of our conversations, there's usually something that someone references that I don't understand. There will be a word in Hebrew, a cultural phrase, a clinical reference, an author's name, something. So if you hear something mentioned, can we, as a community, kind of pitch in and make sure that everybody understands what everything is that's going on? So we're going to use the chat a lot tonight. If you hear something mentioned that could use a little bit more explanation or definition, please go ahead and add it in the chat. Don't wait for someone else to do it, because if you have a question, someone else probably has a question, and let's all do that for each other. It definitely helps me. So yes, the chat, we're going to be using it a lot tonight. We want to learn with and from each other and get to know each other as best we can, even through these little boxes. So if you don't mind, start off by introducing yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're Zooming from tonight if you feel like it. And if you're comfortable, I actually was thinking about it. This is our third weirdish Passover, pandemic Passover. And I don't know about you, but there have been a lot of new traditions that we've all kind of embraced by necessity, by default, over these last couple of years in weird pandemic Passover land. So if there's something actually that you're doing again this year that you found has been an asset to your Seder, share it. Things new that are now part of your tradition. We'd love to learn new stuff that's going on and hear what your tables look like. coming together before Passover to learn new Torah to bring to the table is totally my favorite part of holiday preparations. I was just laughing with our speakers tonight that holiday prep is all downhill from here. I am so excited to learn from each of our educators tonight, and I have been absolutely dying to have Rabbi Wolkenfeld and Danielle Kranjec in the same room together. Both of them fierce advocates for the creation and amplification and canonization of more women's Torah. A little known fact, Rabbi Sara Wolkenfeld just so happens to be my very first playmate. We knew each other before we could walk and talk. So this is the most amazing thing to be able to be here tonight and learn her Torah. So Sara, thank you so much for being here. Heather Miller, thank you for adding an element to my Seder table. I'm so excited. It has felt achingly absent. I am so excited to learn from you. Thank you for being here tonight. And the amazing Rabbi Emily Meyer, bringing beautiful Torah to life tonight before our very eyes. Thank you so much. Tonight, I'm going to take a little bit of a liberty. Tonight's a special night of a little bit of another sort. It's my brother-in-law Donnie's yahrzeit, the anniversary of his passing. He passed away in 2020 during those first scary days of COVID. And there happened to be a pre-planned HerTorah the night of his funeral. So it's very weird and wonderful that we're in that same spot right now. There were many spaces of learning dedicated to his memory today by other wonderful family members. So my family, my immediate family and I chose to sponsor tonight's HerTorah in honor of some other people who are Donnie adjacent. First, my mother-in-law, Bunny Hain, whose personal strength is something that leaves me floored daily. Second, to Dr. Tammy Jacobowitz, who was a dear friend of Donnie's and happened to be a teacher of at HerTorah that night. And she held my eyes through Zoom the entire night and did not let go. And I will never forget that. Third, to Aliza and the SVIVAH leadership team who picked me up and picked HerTorah up to make sure that we were all able to gather together because we all really needed to be together that night. And last, to all of you, because the SVIVAH community, it was a very lonely, sad, and scary time. And I wasn't alone because of all of you. So tonight's HerTorah learning is in honor of all of you, SVIVAH's amazing leadership, Tammy, as a way to say thank you. You surrounded me with care and company when I needed it most. And my hope is that we should all feel so surrounded always. And to Ima, you are the strongest person I know. It is a gift to be able to honor and uplift incredible women. The idea that this is my day job never ceases to amaze me. We'd love to do more of it. If there is someone special to you that we can help honor or remember, please let us know and be in touch about sponsoring a SVIVAH gathering in her name. We would love to do that. With that, I will stop talking and I can introduce one of my favoriteest teachers ever, Rabbanita Lisa Sperling, the visionary behind everything that is HerTorah. You'll see her bio in the chat and she will start us off tonight.
Thanks so much, Ariella. And I think all of us here are thinking now about Donnie and the incredible women who lift us all up. And thank you for being so honest and open and letting us in. Thank you for building this community. I have to say that that I have an extra special thank you to you this month because my family was hit by COVID and the flu at the same time, and it took us a while to get out of that. So while Ariella is always my full partner, this month she really carried it all. So thank you so much for everything. Welcome everybody to HerTorah. I'm so happy that you're all here. I just want to take a couple minutes to tell you what we're about. 3 years ago, the fabulous Ariella started SVIVAH, a nourishing, inclusive community for Jewish women. and we define Jewish women as anyone who defines themselves as a Jewish woman. One of the programs of SVIVAH is HerTorah, where we gather Jewish women to learn with one another in a way that welcomes and actively seeks out Jewish women who are diverse in age, religious background, denomination, location, income level, abilities. We want to be a space where women from all different backgrounds can come together and learn together and engage meaningfully with one another. There are now places where women can get advanced Jewish education. We want SVIVAH to be a platform where those women can come and teach their Torah, and where we can all learn together with open hearts, without regard for any of the dividing lines that sometimes separate different parts of the Jewish community. We think Torah becomes stronger when people who would otherwise never meet or sit in the same space can come together and discuss ideas that are important to all of us. HerTorah meets once a month. Since COVID, we've been meeting on Zoom. Over the past few months, we've been focusing on how Torah is enriched when women bring their own perspectives and experiences. We've learned with Michal Lemberger about modern feminist midrash, met 3 women Sofrot Torah scribes and learned about their craft, celebrated the life of the visionary Sara, and looked at Megillat Esther, the book of Esther, through the lens of sexual survivors. Which brings us to this Passover gathering. Passover is a holiday where we tell our important stories to communicate to one another and to the next generation what is important to us, what we believe, and what we commit to doing in the next year. But often, without even realizing, the Torah that we bring to our Seder tables is written by men, and we only bring the male perspective. What would it look like if we also brought Torah written and taught by women? How could that broaden our understanding of the Exodus and make it even more meaningful? Tonight, we're going to learn from 4 fantastic educators. Danielle Kranjec will teach us some medieval and early modern female voices on the Exodus, and Rabbanit Sara Wolkenfeld will introduce the Torah of modern women who have written about Passover and the Exodus. Heather Miller will teach us the Torah of African American Jewish women, whose experience of Passover is impacted by the historical experience of American slavery. And through it all, Rabbi Emily Meyer will document the Torah these women present visually through her drawings and visual representations. Okay, so this is the first time we're doing this, so we're all going to try to figure out how it works. I'm going to tell you about Rabbi Emily, and you're going to see her bio in the chat, and then I'm going to try to explain to you how you'll be able to see her drawings as we learn together. Rabbi Emily Meyer believes that both the process and the product of creativity enriches learning and deepens connection. She is the creator of Doodly Jew, a product designed to spark creativity in Hebrew learning. Rabbi Meyer was ordained by HUC-JIR in 2010 and holds an undergraduate degree in classics from Connecticut College. She lives in Pittsburgh with her partner, Rabbi Aaron Meyer, and their children, Evelyn and Eli, or Ellie. Find her at doodlyjew.com. Is it Eli or Ellie? Eli.
Yes, Eli.
Eli, okay. All right, so if you would like to see Rabbi Meyer's drawings tonight, go up to your top right corner. Oh, no, forget that. She taught me the right way to do it. You don't have to do anything. I'm going to spotlight her. Okay, we're all good. Rabbi Emily, we're so glad to have you here with us. And I'm going to spotlight you and just make sure it works. Okay, everybody see her? Okay, great. I'm also delighted to welcome tonight Danielle Kranjec. Danielle is the Director of Campus Initiatives for Shalom Hartman Institute of North America, where she leads the vision, design, and implementation of all programming for campus professionals, students, and academics. Previously, Danielle served for 8 years as the Senior Jewish Educator at the Hillel Jewish University Center of Pittsburgh. Inspired by her work to elevate the voices of Jewish women and others marginalized by tradition, her colleagues at Hillel International coined the term Kranjec test to determine whether the sources from which we teach are inclusive. Danielle, we're so excited to hear more about the Kranjec test and to learn about Jewish women's voices on the Passover story. Thanks so much for being with us. Find you in spot.
It's such a pleasure and such an honor to be here with everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's a gift to be together in the same space. As Rabbanit Aliza said, you know, we might not have ever been in the room together in person, so to be here together on Zoom is very special. And what I'm bringing tonight is also a hope of introducing you to some women, some of our ancestors from our past, who you might also have never gotten to be in the room with. I have for my portion of the evening, I have two texts to share with you. And the first one is also a picture, something visual that I think there's a way we can share it out with everyone. So you can hopefully use it at your Seder. And then we're also going to hear the voice of a 19th century Ashkenazi ancestor named Paulina Vengerov. So to start out, I'm going to share screen and introduce you to someone who I have welcomed to my Seder table for a number of years. What you should be seeing for my portion of the screen is an image from an illuminated Haggadah, or the text used at the Passover Seder, the ritual dinner, that comes to us from the 14th century in Catalonia. So if anybody's ever been to Spain, Catalonia is the region where Barcelona is located. And scholars have determined that it was probably drawn and written down sometime around the year 1330. So this was long before the printing press, back in the days when if you wanted a book, a Jewish book or any kind of book, you had to have someone hand copy it for you. So in Jewish history and Jewish art, we don't have a lot of representations of the human figure. For complicated reasons having to do with the fact that in our 10 commandments, in our Torah, we're taught not to represent God in any way. And if human beings are created in the image of God, maybe representing human beings could be a little bit tricky. We don't have a lot of representational art. So to have drawings of Jewish figures in a Jewish text is something very rare and very special. So when I first came across this amazing Haggadah, the beginning of the portion that's illustrated tells the story of the Exodus pictorially, which I think is an amazing way to welcome people into the story. It's very accessible to be able to see the pictures. But the last pages that are illustrated, on the very last page that's illustrated, there are a number of scenes depicting Jewish life and depicting the preparation for Seder night and the Seder night itself. So one of the goals that I had when I started teaching women's Torah, specifically as women's Torah within my work in the Hillel movement, was an effort to see myself, to see my experience, to see the life of a Jewish woman that didn't necessarily take place in the Beit Midrash and wasn't necessarily a part of the rabbinic enterprise, but to see myself and my lived experiences as a woman, as a mother, in the private sphere. And something that really impacted me was reading Rabbi Chaviva Ner David's work on the women's mitzvot and about how can we not only access women's leadership in the public sphere of Judaism, but how can we also lift up the private sphere of Judaism and embrace the commandments that were traditionally designated for women and begin to revere them and valorize them on the same level that we might the public parts of Judaism. And I think in the COVID era, that's become even more relevant as we're all really in our homes so much more than ever before, where private Judaism and our private ritual experiences are really what are grounding us and bringing us together. So I bring this image to you very humbly, but also in a hope that maybe there's something you could see of yourself in it too. So I'm just going to describe the image moving from right to left. It's kind of like a comic book, basically. These, you remember it's a Hebrew book, so it reads from right to left, like our alphabet. And I'm going to read it like a comic. So we're in a very luxurious, wealthy family home in Catalonia. And we see on the far right a large figure of the patriarch of the family, and he's holding the Kiddush cup, the cup of blessing for the wine that is used ritually in the Passover meal, in his right hand, and in his left hand, he's holding a book. And he's actually meant to be holding the book that we're seeing. It's like a meta text. He's holding the Haggadah, the text for the Seder ritual. Moving from right to left, the next figure that we see is a servant who's depicted as smaller, something about the power and who is the primary figure of the story is the patriarch. The servant here is depicted to be much smaller. And the servant is also holding a cup in his left hand and a decanter of wine on his right. On the table, we see various items that one might need for the Seder evening, including some round matzahs. So it seems like the unleavened bread that was used in Catalonia in the 14th century was round in shape. So just an interesting thing to pick up on. Continuing to move across the image, we see another smaller figure who's a servant. And then we come to the figure who my eye was drawn to immediately, and the woman who I want us to invite symbolically to our seders this year. We see a woman, and she's eating something. I can tell you it's celery, and she's fulfilling the mitzvah of karpas at her Seder. And she's wearing a beautiful red dress, again, very luxurious. It has a lot of accessories. She has her hair braided and twisted in some way, and some kind of really gorgeous ornament to her head covering that wraps up around her chin and up over her head. And she's drawn in 2 dimensions, and she's looking at we're assuming her husband. She looks much younger than the patriarch far to the right of the image. So there's another figure sitting to her left who's likely her husband, and they are representing, let's say, the next generation of the family at this Seder meal in a beautifully ornate room with tiled walls and wood furniture. The thing that calls out to me that I want to share about this image is that here, the woman is depicted the same size as the men. She's not smaller than them in any way. She's sitting at the table. She's taking up space, and she's fulfilling the mitzvah, the commandment to eat a ritual food the same way as the man sitting next to her, assuming to be her husband. To me, that says something about women's role. We have a place at the table. And for me, there's something very comforting to think about someone nearly 700 years ago, a Sephardi ancestor in Iberia, doing this ritual that, God willing, we will all get to do in just a few short days. So I hope, we don't know her name. We don't know the name of the family who commissioned this Haggadah and who had it written down, but we have a depiction of her face, which to me, I think is so special. So I hope you like her. The next person that I want to introduce you to, we know her face and her name, and we have her words. First, I want to give credit and teach in the name of my teacher, Dr. Shulamit Magnus, who now lives in Jerusalem, who was someone gave a cheer. Yeah, she's amazing. She's an extraordinary teacher, and she was my teacher in Jewish studies at Oberlin College. And it was with her more than 20 years ago when I first began to read the words of Paulina Vengerhoff, who Dr. Magnus translated from German into English for English-speaking audiences. And I know we have another Oberlin person, at least one other one here in the audience. So thanks, Zoe, for coming tonight. Paulina Vengerhoff lived in the 19th century and experienced what is called the Haskalah, or the Enlightenment, which was also a process of assimilation and acculturation on behalf of Jews in Eastern Europe. And for her, it was a tragic process by which not only did Jews lose the ability to have their tradition and have their history, she also saw it as a movement that ultimately disempowered women, because women's power in the Jewish community was often exercised in Jewish ritual life and in the private sphere. As the Jews in Eastern Europe began to acculturate to the broader society and lose that Jewishness, women were also disempowered. So bring the words of Paulina Vengerhoff, whose birth name was Pesila Epstein. So like, I always kind of just want to call her Pesila in like a very tender way of feeling like we have a connection, or feeling like we're somehow inside the conversation with her. Although my sense from her writings is that she was a very formal woman, so maybe I shouldn't presume to call her by her name. But she shares the story of her life in a particular way, and the story of the Jewish community in the earlier part of the 19th century, before Russian law and anti-Semitism helped accelerate the pace of Haskalah, of enlightenment, and of Jewish assimilation to the broader culture. A couple of things I want to say that I think are very important is that she wrote her memoirs down in German, and this was an attempt to make sure that they had a broad audience outside of the Yiddish-speaking community to which she belonged, and also that they might be read in a particular way. She calls it the memoirs of a grandmother, but if you read her 2-volume memoirs in an attempt to reconstruct the story of her family of origin and also the family that she created with her husband, you will be hard-pressed to find those kind of details. Here, I think we should understand the term grandmother as more a sage or an elder, rather than Bubby, rather than the tender woman nurturing children, or passing on a family kind of heritage, because she had many grandchildren and she doesn't mention any of them in the book. So I just want, for people who know Glickel, who lived in the 17th century and are familiar with other kinds of Jewish women's memoir, this is a very different kind of memoir, but one that I think has so much Torah in it. And when I'm teaching Torah, I want to be clear that I have an expansive view of what is Torah. For me, one of the characteristics of Torah is something that we can come back to again and again to learn. And I think if we want to bring women's voices, we have to make sure that we're looking at genres beyond the rabbinic enterprise. And for people who say, oh, I would cite women, but there are no women to cite, or I would learn women, but there are no women to learn from, what I'm saying is we have to expand the bookshelf. If we want to find a 17th century Hasidic master, we're not going to find one, but we have Glickel. If we want to find a 19th century woman philosopher, you might not find Paulina Vengerhoff in the academy, but you will find her works, you will find her words, and we need to add her to the bookshelf because there's deep Torah and philosophical truth that she's given us. And I think we have to take the initiative to be sure to bring her and to bring all of our ancestors' voices to the fullness of the Torah that we learn. In volume 1 of her memoirs, Paulina Vengerhoff takes a long time to describe the work that some of us may have already started and that some of us will be beginning to prepare for Passover. And you should know that in her family of origin, Passover preparations began when? Shushan Purim, the day after Purim, is when Passover preparations began. I want to read to you a brief portion of her memoir that talks about making matzah. And in doing so, I hope that we can lift up the everyday lived experiences of our ancestors and know that this too is Torah, and this is something that sustained us throughout the centuries. She says, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, on the first day of the month of Nisan, it drew near, and the baking of matzahs, unleavened bread, now began. Baking the matzahs lasted for almost 2 days. My mother walked around indefatigable, from time to time inspecting the rolling pins with which the women rolled the matzahs in order to scrape off any dough that had adhered there. My brothers-in-law and my brother, who were armed with small pieces of glass fragments, helped. The particles had to be removed because stuck on dough was already chametz, that is, leavened dough, and thus was not allowed to be kneaded into the matzah dough, which was unleavened. The young man also helped by tracing the matzahs with a perforating wheel. It never occurred to anyone to consider such worth beneath them, since all that concerned Pesach, Passover, and especially the matzahs, was considered a religious act. On the next day, my mother inspected all of the matzahs, of which there were several thousand, to see whether perhaps a twisted or not fully baked one might be found, because such a one was already chametz and would have to be discarded. In strict order, the flawless matzahs were now laid in rows on the large red chests, which were covered with a white cloth. My mother had taken one matzah under the cloth, and without looking at it, her eyes closed, broke it in half while softly reciting the benediction for this act. Then, still without looking at it, she flung this piece of matzah back into the flames. This custom was called taking challah. It was to recall the portion due the priest. My blessing for all of us this coming Passover is that we can have a moment of holiness to bless the holy preparation and the holy work that we've done to get our families, our houses ready for Passover, whatever that means in whatever way that we do it. I don't know that anyone else is going to be baking thousands of handmade, hand-rolled matzahs in their home this year, but whatever small step you take to recognize this tradition, this holy act, the sacred act, this part of our peoplehood, this part of our heritage, our yichus, I hope that you can bring that same moment that Paulina describes of her mother making the blessing. And I hope that you can say her name and the names of other Jewish women, of other ancestors whose work and dedication and authority and Torah and knowledge and truth got us to this very moment. So thank you. Thanks to everybody, and Chag Sameach.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I love what you said about needing to expand what we think of as Torah, and to kind of look at all the things that we do as Torah. And in that vein, I want to invite Heather Miller to come and speak to us about the Torah of what you put on your Passover table, on your Seder plate, and how that can convey identity and beliefs and values, and really give us an insight into your own work that you do. Heather Miller is an educator and future rabbi who is passionate about creating embracing spaces in both the religious and secular parts of her life. She is the founder of The Multitudes, where she designs and facilitates workshops for synagogues and school communities that help cultivate a more racially inclusive lens. Her favorite role of all, however, is as the mother of 3 amazing boys who are proudly descended from both freed slaves and Holocaust survivors. Welcome, Heather.
Hey, thank you. So I too could not love more that beautiful segue into expanding our canon, so to speak. I think that I wish that I was coming to you with a host of sources from people who look like me in our Jewish community. However, I am really humbled at the idea that we're in this space right now, because this is the history that we're building, the her story that we are building in this moment together. So I am going to share my slides really quickly. All right, so I am starting this, and I'm coining it, why is there a pine cone on your Seder plate? And so in my hand, I am holding a pine cone. And so there is a tradition now, there's new and growing traditions where every year we're adding different items to our Seder plate to enhance the questions that are asked and answered around the table. The pine cone is a newer one. It actually is something that represents criminal justice reform and mass incarceration. And so this is just an item that's an example of the different things that are starting to pop up as people are bringing their views of social justice onto the Passover table. Hold on, let's see, there we go. So I want to literally set the stage here. And I do so with this data points only to establish that when it comes to Jews of color, I'm speaking from the lens of a Black Jewish woman, many of us identify as Ashkenazi. And I think that that is really significant, because I think that some folks have an idea that there's a different way that we do traditions, and really there isn't. Our seders look the same. However, what is different is that we're seeking the answers to the 4 questions and situating that in different ways every year as part of our exploration into how we are melding the different parts of who we are in all of the different ways that we come to this earth. Both through our Jewish ethnic lens and cultural lens, and also through that lens and the culture that gives us the melanin that we have. So here is an image here. So on the screen, you can see there is a food pyramid that goes from the top. You have sweets, you have different items, there's dairy, there's meats and healthy oils, and all the way down at the base you have being physically active. And what this is that there is a movement that is being embraced by some folks who seek to incorporate the foods from Africa into their regular diets. And the connection here is that where this connects is that this has started to make its way onto our Seder plates, as was mentioned in the beginning. I think that for me, Black liberation and the story of Exodus are very deeply part of my Black and Jewish identity. And I think that I think it would be safe to say that many of us see Passover as personifying empowerment. Because it's really hard to hold a story about the liberation of slavery separately from the Black slavery narrative. And so very deeply, we see that intersection. And so these foods here, there have been many who have figured out ways to incorporate these foods from various African countries onto our Seder plates. But I want to start with the 4 questions, because don't we all start with the 4 questions? Like, why is there a pine cone on your Passover table? And so here are the questions that were found by a culinary food historian. And so one of them, I really just loved that this was a translation. This is a translation of the 4 questions that came from the Gullah Geechee nation. And I love the idea that it came from a chiefess. And so I won't pretend to be able to read this. This is not, though my people do come from this land, I could not say it, but what you can see on the screen is you can see the 4 questions in here. Like, for example, like pon de oda inden we nayam put pun a kind of vegetable. So you can see that there. And there's a culinary food historian, Michael Twitty, who found something like 300 different translations of the 4 questions from around the world and from different cultures. And so here is one from the Gullah Geechee nation. And if you're not familiar with that, that would be from like the Louisiana portion of the United States. There was also one that was found in Mendi, which is from Sierra Leone. And so I think that is so beautiful that in so many different African cultures, this story of liberation and really the origin story of the Jewish people is a thread that belongs to so many people. And so here we come to the Seder plate. And so this is one place that this might show up. As I mentioned, this is something that I would not say, there are some folks who have adopted this as their Seder plates. Others may have 2 Seder plates, and that can be part of the conversation around the table. Some folks might incorporate some of these items on night 2 and have a different Seder. And so there's a lot of different ways that people are incorporating all of the different items that have appeared on Seder plates these days. And so I'll describe each of the things on the plate. So we have a chicken bone, and the chicken bone is placed there instead of the lamb shank bone. And that represents traditional sacrifices and migration from oppression to opportunity during the Great Migration. We have haroset. Haroset is traditionally made from fruits and nuts and wine, but this particular recipe is made from molasses and pecans, representing the sugar cane that fueled the beginnings of slavery and the duality of our culture and exile. Though we were in bondage, we found things here in this land to cope and to help us overcome. The sweet potato is in place of the karpas, or the spring vegetable. It is traditionally parsley or tomato or potato, and this item is symbolic of using the American environment to perpetuate West and Central African culture and tradition. The egg, or beitza, symbol of overcoming oppression, the supreme being, spring, the cycles of nature and rebirth. Collard greens, or the maror, or bitter herbs, to symbolize both the bitterness of enslavement, but also how we survived it. It's quite a resilient vegetable. The hot pepper, in place of horseradish or hazeret, which is a sharper variety of maror, which is meant to give the sense of the sting of the lash, but it's also a spice central to West and Central African food that is proverbially associated with speaking truth. We have the hoe cake, or ash cake. And so now this version here, this is traditionally, if you're going to have one of these down south, it is made from corn, which is the closest thing. This is one of the closest foods that you would have from the African tradition to matzah, which is the flatbread of slavery. But it's also, in the United States, the corn represented one of the first foods of freedom. This is it's very simply prepared in a similar way. It was the hardtack of enslavement in the colonial and antebellum South. And now we know that in many of our Ashkenazi tradition, kitniot is forbidden. And so in this recipe, this is one where you can swap out the corn meal with matzah. And so that can still be on the plate and be allowed. You have the orange, which is a modern symbol, and that is usually the symbol for inclusion. And I think that is a very beautiful image, because we're welcoming to our Seder plates and our Seder tables those who are often excluded and felt left out of our religious spaces or our spiritual practices, from women in leadership to sexual minorities or the poor or the differently abled. The sweet flavor brings the flavor of inclusion to us all. And so I am about out of time. I'm going to stop my share. But what I will say is that for me, Passover is one of my very favorite holidays. Not so much like finding Cheerios in every nook and cranny. I have 3 children. There's food everywhere. But I will say that it's the start of the Torah holiday season. And it's a chance for me to connect to the ways that I am at the journey that I am on in my quest towards making liberation tangible. I don't just tell the story. I use this time as a time of reflection to do the things to honor the gift of freedom that I have. I firmly believe.
Someone's at the front door.
I'm sorry, Alexa is saying that there's somebody at the front door. So I am my ancestors' wildest dream. I don't think that my ancestors ever thought that I would be a person being able to sit in a room like this. And so I use that time, the time that I have on this earth, to work really hard towards liberating other people in all of my spheres of influence. So thank you so much for learning with me.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was really amazing. And it really shows you, or shows me, how including other perspectives and voices, like, how did I never know this until this year? I'm like, how could that be? And I'm so happy that you've come to teach us and to bring us all this Torah. And I hope that we can learn more from you. Okay, so now we are getting to the point in the evening where some people need to take some of that Passover spirit of overcoming and hold on to it, because we are going to put you into breakout rooms. And I know that for some people that's really scary, but I'm imploring you to please stay with us. We're going to send you to breakout rooms for about 10 minutes. Because we're not in person, we're just on Zoom. We still want to have a way for you to get to know one another. And so we're going to send you out into breakout rooms, and we are going to give you 4 questions to talk about. I know that number just leaped into my mind. I don't know why. Willa, are you able to share the 4 questions?
Let me it here.
Okay. So so we have, do you see it in the, can you put it in the chat?
I am sharing them right now. There.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay. So we are going to put these questions in the chat as well, so that when you go out to the breakout rooms, you'll still be able to see them. But here are the 4 questions that we've got for you, and feel free to expand on this. First of all, please introduce yourself to each other. And then we've got these 4 questions. Number 1, we learned this evening about the African American Seder plate, where symbolic foods are added to the Passover table to recall and celebrate African American Jewish identity. What are the values and experiences that are important to you and you would like to remember? What physical objects can you set up on your Seder table to remind you of these values? Number 2, so you can just choose one of them that appeals to you. On Passover, we celebrate our freedom. Who is the most free person you know? What makes them free? What could you learn from them in your own life? Okay, number 3. For some, Passover is a time to remember family members or friends who have passed on, but had significant impacts upon us. Who would you like to remember this Passover? What do you want to share about this person? And then finally, number 4, one of the first things we do at our Seder is to invite all who are hungry or in need to join us. What are some practices? Hold on, Ariella, your chat is popping up, so I can't see what it says. On Passover and beyond, to help those who are in need. So those are the 4 questions. We're going to put you out into breakout rooms just for a chance to get to know one another. If breakout rooms are really not your thing, then just don't accept the invitation. Wait 10 minutes and then come back to join us. Okay, thanks, Willa. We can stop the share now. Thank you.
And then come back, because we have more amazingness to learn from.
Yes, and then please come back, because then we have the amazing Rabbinite Sara Wolkenfeld, who's going to teach us.
Just wanted to say hi, and Eliza, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you. Hold on, I don't even see. Hold on.
Hi, Amy, you just joined us. We just this second put everybody into 10-minute breakout rooms with some Passover related prompts and questions. Can I put you in a fun breakout room and you can be an amazing active listener because the questions are great. You can get to know some folks. I can promise you that.
Ariel, can you hear me? This is Galid. I went into a breakout room. There weren't other people. Can you send me somewhere?
Yes, I will.
I'm
Thank
supposed
you.
to. Oh, okay. I'm not in a breakout room either yet. Babe, I think I need a bigger light.
Who was the other person who just said?
Galid, I have the Yaldinu preschool
Yes.
little hand sign.
I'm gonna go put you in someplace fabulous. Give me 1 second. Why can't I find you in the list? So weird. Hold
It's
on.
under Yaldinu.
Yeah.
YALDAYNU.
Yeah. Oh, here. Gotcha. Hi, Pam. I see you just popped in. We're 2 minutes away from bringing everybody back. Actually, 1.5 minutes from bringing everybody back from breakouts. And we're going to have some more amazing learning from Rabbi Sara Wolkenfeld. So I can stick you in the last couple of seconds in a breakout, or you can hang out here with us. And we'll bring everybody back in a minute. It's up to you.
I think I'm going to close the rooms now. So,
okay.
Takes people a while to come back.
Great.
Welcome back, everybody. It's still so nice to see everybody's face. I kind of like sending people out and coming them back, like the whole back and forth is just fun. For me, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, it's lovely.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I love the people who stay in their breakout rooms till the last second and are just kind of pulled back. And I hope that you all had good conversations. Now I'd like to introduce you to the amazing Rabbanit Sara Wolkenfeld. Sara is incredibly talented and passionate about bringing women's voices to the table. She is the Chief Learning Officer at SVIVAH, an online database and interface for Jewish texts. Sara is also a fellow at the David Hartman Center, the Hartman Institute of North America, and is a member of Class 6 of the Wexner Field Fellowship. She writes about Jewish text and Jewish law, and her current projects focus on applying Talmudic ideas to questions of advancement in digital technology. I will say on a personal note that Sara ran this incredible women's writing fellowship last year, a collaboration between SVIVAH and Maharat that was really transformative for me, and I'm so grateful to her. Sara is going to introduce us to women who are writing about the Exodus, about Passover, so we can bring them to our Seder tables.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here in this space with all of you and with Rabbanit Eliza. You heard about how she and I go way back. With Ariella, you heard about how she and I go way, way back. And all of the speakers this evening have just blown me away. And then this breakout room conversation was amazing. So thank you all so much. I am, as was mentioned, really passionate about the idea of raising up women's voices around Torah. I work for SVIVAH. You heard about that. If you don't know it, SVIVAH is an online database and interface for Jewish texts. SVIVAH's mission is to maximize the impact of Torah in the digital age. And to me personally, and also for my colleagues, part of what that means is that as we're constructing this new digital Beit Midrash, we need to think about what those Beit Midrash shelves are going to look like. We need to think about inclusion in this learning space. A Beit Midrash is just a Jewish library. What is the Jewish library of the future going to look like? And here's I'm honored to be in this space with Danielle, who thinks so much about these questions. I would say that I so agree about kind of maximizing, grabbing women's voices from all over. And also, I think it's really important. I always tell people that SVIVAH's library doesn't have a mechitza. We don't have a dividing line. We don't have men's Torah and women's Torah, but we know that we have incredible female scholars, incredible scholars who identify as women, who are learning Torah right here, right now, creating Torah right here, right now, and they can draw on what you might call men's Torah, which I would just call ancient Torah, old Torah, the building blocks of our tradition. They can draw on all of that to create new resources that are wonderful and amazing and will be great for our Sederim today, our Seders, our Passover celebrations that we're going to have. So I'll start with a question also. Why is this night different from all other nights? And my answer is that on all other nights, when we don't study women's Torah, we are missing out on a great opportunity. But on Passover, if we don't study women's Torah, we're actually missing a crucial piece of the celebration of the holiday. And I want to share my screen with you and share a resource with you so I can tell you a little bit about why I think that. And I'm happy to share this resource out as well. I can't really do two things at once, so I'll put it in the chat afterwards. The Talmud tells us in Tractate Psachim, which is like appropriately named, right? This is the tractate that's actually about Passover. The tractate in talking about the celebration of Passover, that night, that Seder night, says that women are obligated in the 4 cups of wine that are consumed at the Passover Seder. You might know that as kind of a central component. On all other nights, we typically would drink 1 cup of wine or grape juice. At least that's certainly all my children get, is the 1 cup of grape juice. And on Passover at night, we have this special tradition of having 4 cups that reflect 4 of the different words that are used to describe the redemption that we're commemorating on that night. And what the Talmud tells us, it's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who's definitely my favorite named rabbi in the Talmud. He says that women are also fully obligated to consume those 4 cups, sha'af hen hayu be'oto hanes, because they too were included in that miracle. They were a part of the miracle of Passover. Because actually, Passover is about miracles. All kinds of things can be miracles. Of course, the Passover celebration is primarily about the Exodus from Egypt, but I'm comfortable using that word miraculous more broadly. I think there's something miraculous about all of us being together in this space right now. And if you're willing, and now that you've made friends and connected with other people, if you're willing to put in the chat, or you can write it down for yourself if you don't want to share it with everybody else, what has been the greatest miracle in your life since last Passover? What miracle will you want to commemorate this Passover? I want to open up that question really broadly. I also want to say, though, that survival also counts. If you feel that what you've done since last Passover is make it through the year, that is very legitimate, and I will happily accept that as an answer. At the moment, looking around my house, I feel that the miracle of my Passover will be if I actually manage to prepare for the seders. That will be a miracle, but maybe given more time, I'll come up with a better answer. So again, if you're willing to share, and if you're not, you can kind of jot it down for yourself and think about what will you want to be celebrating when you're at your Seder. What's the miracle that you'll want to keep in mind? So that's kind of the framing. That's how the rabbis of the Talmud frame Passover, is that it's a celebration of miracles, and women too were included in that miracle. And you could really think of that in a kind of very passive way. Obviously, women were included in the miracle. All of the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt. And so everyone was redeemed from Egypt. Some of you have some really amazing, incredible answers, though, about health and survival. And those are very worthy of being celebrated. And I also am seeing some voices about, sort of connecting with people you haven't been with maybe in a while. And I think there's a lot to be grateful for and a lot to think of as miraculous this Passover. But the rabbinic tradition, the somewhat masculine dominated rabbinic tradition, doesn't stop at saying that women were included in that miracle. Rashi, the great medieval commentary on the Talmud, actually says that what this means, that they were included in the miracle, is, as it says in the Talmud and Sota, B'schar nashim tzidkaniyot, in the merit of the righteous women in that generation, they were redeemed. And so too with Passover, and so too with Purim, and so too with Hanukkah. Not that women were just included in the miracle, not just that they were saved, not just that they exited Egypt, but that women actually had a leadership role in the Exodus, that women actually took the lead in this holiday. And again, right, they're they took a lead, they took a leadership role. They're an inspiration for us. We can do that too. We can raise up our voices. The specific reference here is just a mind-blowing piece of Talmud from a different tractate. So I'm going to just click to open the side panel here so that you can see that, although I didn't officially include it in this sheet. This is a reference to the Talmud in Sota, where it says, again, that it was the righteous women of that generation who merited the redemption from Egypt. And how did they do that? Okay, so this, you may or may not want to retell all of this at your Seder because it is not rated G for all audiences. But there's a story that a midrash, that the women would go out and catch small fish that God would put into their buckets of water. They would feed them to their husbands. They would essentially seduce their husbands. They would take them out to the field. They would be sexually intimate with their husbands. And that's how they got pregnant, even during this terrible time of oppression. And the story goes on and on to describe really the women as the sustaining force in what we would now call Jewish continuity. They decided they were going to have children despite all the hardships. They figured out exactly how to make that happen. They gave birth in the fields. And eventually where this story ends up is with the Meyeldot, with the midwives, the famous midwives who stood up to Pharaoh and refused to drown the baby boys, refused to kill off the baby boys. And so this reconstruction of the Passover story, which I know I'm scrolling through quickly, but I promise you it's here on Sefaria for all of you, and it's in English, and you're going to get this sheet afterwards and you can access it. It's a retelling of the Passover story that the men are bit players in this story. The men have a supporting role. They were necessary somewhat for the production of the babies, but the women drive the whole story. And they are really, again, the driving force in how it was that we got out of Egypt. The whole story starts with them. And if the whole story starts with the women, then we really couldn't possibly leave the women out of the story when we go to tell it on Seder night. And so with that in mind, and with that as inspiration, and with all of your incredible miracles as inspiration, which, wow, there is so much here to celebrate and to be grateful for, and really to commemorate. And it might take more than 4 cups of wine at some of your seders, I'm just saying, given all that you've listed here. But with all of that as inspiration, I want to let you know about some amazing resources for lifting up women's voices, some of which exist on Sefaria and some of which exist off Sefaria. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about them before ending up with one piece of my Torah that I'll share out to you. So there are some amazing women who have created Haggadot, have created textbooks or liturgy books for the night of the Seder, as well as women who've created resources that are kind of Seder adjacent, is how I would describe them, right? You could use them at the Seder, even if that's not what they're created for. My good friend, Dr. Erica Brown, has a Haggadah, and I link to it there. What's amazing about her work, which I have here, I haven't unpacked all of the Haggadot yet, so I can't show them all to you, but here's Erica's. And what I think is amazing about her Haggadah is that she has so many amazing insights, but also questions that you can ask at your Seder. And I think we shouldn't, I say I'm not the only one who loves her Haggadah, I think we shouldn't minimize that moment of being the one to ask the question to spark the meaningful conversation. That's a way also that we bring our voices to the table. Sometimes all you need is a good question to get everyone else started. Rabbi Lisa just showed that to us with her questions for the breakout rooms. You can do it too. And again, if you're not sure where to start, I think Erica's Haggadah is a great place to start. There is a Haggadah that is a collection of Nechama Leibowitz's Torah, and her sheets in Hebrew also exist on Sefaria. She was maybe the first modern great teacher of Torah. Really, she taught Parshat HaShavua, she taught the weekly Torah portion, and but a lot of that has to do with the Haggadah, right, with the story of the Exodus. So I recommend that resource. Also, if you're looking for general Torah resources, Aviva Zornberg, Dr. Aviva Zornberg, an amazing Torah scholar who just published a new book, but it's on Leviticus, so it won't help you for Passover. We'll need a separate event for that one. But she does have a book about Moses, who is also gets a little sidelined actually in the Seder, but you could choose to bring him back. And that work is actually on Sefaria. My colleague, Rabbi Tina Berkowitz, has a Haggadah that also has some great material. My teacher, Rabbi David Silber, and my friend and colleague and teacher, Rachel First, have a Haggadah that they put out. And kind of an oldie but goodie, I haven't looked at it in a long time, Women at the Seder, from Rabbi Joel Wolowski, is not by a woman, but does have a lot of commentary and content about women at the Seder. So those are all some resources that you could try. But I really think that there's something about the Seder as a ritual, and something about the Haggadah as a text that lends itself to ongoing expansion. The question that was asked at the beginning when we first started about, what's one Seder tradition that you have? Mine is not a recent one, but my family's tradition since I was a little girl has always been to buy a new Haggadah each and every Passover, which of course means that we don't all use the same Haggadah at the Seder, which of course chaos ensues, but we've all had 4 cups of wine, so no one cares. So it's great. But I really recommend you to kind of try to branch out a little bit and think about what else you might include in your Seder this year that maybe you haven't included before. So I want to point you to 2 great categories of resources on Sefaria. One is sheets and one is topics. And one of the amazing things, in addition to Sefaria's library, one of the amazing things that we have on Sefaria is user-generated content. I think someone put in the chat like a few minutes ago, so I've lost it already, that they just made their first sheet on Sefaria, so thank you. We have had this tradition in my family for a long time of constantly buying a new Haggadah, and we've had the ability to create source sheets on Sefaria since the beginning of Sefaria, which is around 2013. Was that Carolyn? Great. But we noticed an interesting phenomenon over time. Our source sheet creators on Sefaria are split about 50-50 men and women. But when it comes to the number of public sheets, because you can create a sheet on Sefaria, you can create a resource and keep it private just to yourself. The number of people creating public sheets usually divides something like 70-30 or 80-20. And I'll let you guess where the women are in that scale. So women are not creating Torah. They're not avoiding the creation of Torah. They're not holding back from giving voice to their thoughts. They're just not sharing it out. And whether you share it out just at your Seder table, or whether you put it online so that the rest of us can also share it at our Seder tables, we really hope that you'll feel empowered to do that. So you can go into the Haggadah on Sefaria. You can do that, and if you can find it under liturgy, but I'll just type Haggadah into the search bar here. And I'm going to pick the one with the little book icon. And anyone have a favorite part of the Seder? You guys can all shout out in the chat your favorite parts of the Seder, so I can try to go through some of those. As you look at the different parts of the Seder, Karpas is probably in my top 3, I would say. So I just clicked on the text, and you can see that there are 35 sheets that relate to this text. Some of them are by men, some of them are by women. But if you scroll through long enough on Sefaria and you know a lot of Jews, you'll eventually find a friend, or you'll find something that really interests you as a title, like the Haggadah as a source text for lifelong happiness. I think I want that one. Practice for Passover, Kulanu. What else looks good? I don't read Russian, but that's a really poignant one to see right now. We do have users all over the world, including lots of sheets in Hebrew. And so you can just go through, you can look at different parts of the Haggadah, and you can look and see what's a resource that you might want to use, because everything that's available on Sefaria is there for you. It's there for you to read. It's there for you to share out with other people. Oh, the songs are such a good one. Magid, I feel like is like a hard answer because there's so much of Magid. I wonder actually if we have sheets about the songs. If there aren't, then you'll all be obligated since you're here tonight to make them. So that's like a dangerous thing to look at. Let's see about that. Oh, I'm sure Dayenu has, right? Dayenu is a good song. Let's see if Chad Gadya has any sheets on it. I have to admit, I don't think I've ever made a source sheet about Chad Gadya. Oh yeah, look at that, 28 sheets. So still lots to choose from here. Some of them just have commentaries, but I see lots of good things, including ones from schools. So you can scroll through and see what you find about, again, all of these different parts of the Seder. And if there's a sheet that you don't see, you should make it, and you should make it public, because we would definitely, on behalf of all my colleagues, we would love to see that. And the other use I would suggest for Sefaria going into the Seder is to think about, just thinking about tradition, thinking about stories you've learned, thinking about different parts of your religious and spiritual life. What are the pieces that maybe aren't included in the Haggadah, in the traditional liturgy of the Seder, that you want to include? So someone mentioned earlier, I think Danielle mentioned, having a cup for Miriam, a kos shel Miriam. Miriam doesn't get a lot of play at the Seder, but if you search for her name on Sefaria, you will get one of the options is #Miriam. Now you can find sources that mention Miriam. All of these sources, again, are accessible, and most of them are in both Hebrew and English. And then if you click here on sheets, you'll see, again, many, many sheets. Not going to brag or anything, but the top one is from my cousin. You can see ones that include artwork, from amazing women leaders and writers and rabbis. Again, these sheets are all there for you to grab. Miriam the prophet, a charismatic leader among men. Gotta love that one. These are all pieces that you could use in your preparation for Seder as you sit down to think about what are you going to share at your Seder this year. Again, these and so many more resources are all here for you. And again, as you go through the Haggadah, you'll eventually find something that seems interesting, or something that someone that you know taught. So my personal favorite, which I also link to on the sheet, my current favorite part of the Seder is Korach, is about the sandwich. And when I click here on sheets, you can see that I have a public sheet. It's called Korach, the most meaningful sandwich you'll ever eat. And if you're sort of, your Seder's kind of lagging by that point, because it's like been a while and you're kind of eating, but you're not really eating yet because it's a matzah sandwich. It's like not the best. I really encourage you to look at some of the resources that I put on this sheet, which kind of ask some questions about like why we're doing this. And I think my favorite piece, and kind of the thought that I'll leave you with, because I'm thinking about this year, this really difficult Pesach year with so many hard things going on in the world. Korach is a sandwich. We sandwich maror, we sandwich the bitter herb between two pieces of matzah. There's an idea that people sometimes have that when sad things happen, you can kind of leave grief behind. But there's a lot of literature about the fact that that's not really true, that what we actually do is we kind of build over our grief and we sort of layer out around our grief. And so you can think of the Korach sandwich this way, as sort of holding something sad at its center, and what do we kind of cushion around it in order to make that bearable and in order to build an experience that's meaningful for ourselves and our families. So that's my Torah for tonight. And I'll just say as a last pitch that even though Ariella and Rabbi Emily were so kind in inviting me to share my words of Torah, but it's really true story. I actually believe that the most important words of Torah are the ones that you will write and you will share at your seders. So I encourage you to do that. If you can share them publicly on Sefaria, even better. But I really hope that you'll all feel drawn to share out Torah at the Seder this year.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit Sara. I feel like we've just experienced all this Torah coming down on us, which is so wonderful. And I wonder, Emily, if you were able to share with us some of what you captured tonight, to kind of to kind of bring everything together.
I was really inspired. I'm going to keep my picture off so that you can see more of the words and the images. First of all, I feel like incredibly honored to be in this group of scholars. I am basking in their knowledge, and it's just wonderful to be here. I was inspired by so much of what was said tonight, seeing ourselves in our stories, finding our connections, bringing our whole selves to our plate, and recognizing all of the different flavors that we can use to tell the story, seeing the connections that we make between our stories and stories of others and stories of our country and stories of our world. I think that's really amazing. And then recognizing the importance of adding our voices and sharing it out, because not only were we part of the miracle, but we were in control of the miracle, and that our voices are the key to expansion. I think it's just incredible Torah, and I'm so glad I got to capture a little bit of it.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, thank you so much to all of our teachers. Thank you to Danielle, and to Heather, and to Rabbi Sara, and to Rabbi Emily. Thank you so much for sharing your Torah with us. We are going to close now, but before we leave, this has been a time of hardship in the world, and we wanted to end with a prayer for peace. We're all thinking and praying, first of all, for our brothers and sisters in Israel who are going through a really tough time right now, and also we are all thinking about the war in Ukraine. So we are going to end with a prayer for peace. I'll read it in Hebrew and English. Eloheinu שבשמיים, יוצר כל בשר ומפליא לעשות, אל דמילך, אל תחרש ואל תשקוט אל. כי הנה קם בן בליעל ויאמר על ארץ אחרת, קומו ונקומה עליה למלחמה. ואתה שציוויתנו בדברי קודשך לאמור, לא תעמוד על דם רעך, אני השם, אמור למשחית הרף. אנא אלוהי הרוחות לכל בשר, עשה בכוחך הגדול, לעצור את שפיכות הדמים ומעשי הזוועה, ונתת שלום בארץ ושמחת עולם לכל יושביה. וקוים בה מקרא שכתוב, ונכרתה קשת מלחמה, דיבר שלום לגויים, ושפט בין הגויים, והוכיח לעמים רבים וכיתתו חרבותם לעתים וחניתותם למזמרות, לא יישא גוי על גוי חרב, ולא ילמדו עוד מלחמה, ונאמר אמן. God in heaven, creator of all flesh, worker of wonders, do not stay silent, do not remain voiceless, do not keep aloof. For an evil man has come to power and declared war on a sovereign country, saying, we will rise up violently against you in battle. But you, God, have commanded us in your sacred scriptures, saying, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. I am God. Therefore, make the aggressor desist from destruction. We pray to you now, God of the spirits of all flesh, to use your infinite power to end these acts of bloodshed and terror, spread peace across the earth, and bring joy to all its inhabitants, so that the words of the prophet can be fulfilled. The warrior's bow will be broken, and peace will be promised to all peoples. God will judge the nations and arbitrate between many countries. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. And let us say, Amen.
Amen, amen, Yishakafach.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And a special thank you again to Ariella. And I'm going to turn it back to you.
Eliza, I don't know how to say thank you enough to each of our phenomenal educators and to all of you. I only have 12 chairs around my table and I don't know how to fit all of you around it, but you're all coming. I'm like reading the miracles in the chat is like filling me up.
everything tonight. Sara, thank you. I don't know why I'm so like dense that I didn't even think to look up the Haggadah on Sefaria when I use it like every other day. This is brilliant and amazing. And I'm going to take each and every one of you, and Danielle shared about the idea of creating a blessing over the preparations for Pesach. And it feels like that was what this night was. I'm full to the brim. And I haven't even had matzo ball soup. And I'm grateful to all of you in such a profound way. Thank you. Heather, Emily, Sara, Danielle, Aliza, thank you to each one of you.